all you want to. Money, I'ma front you. Girl, I wanna flaunt you. I'ma always want you. And no. Eliana Murillo, how are you doing?
I'm doing so great. I'm so happy to be here and I'm grateful. Thank you for having me.
No, of course. You know what? I'm a big fan. And like I was telling you earlier, researching the guests is always the fun part because to me, it's not just an interview. It's telling our stories, telling success stories. And I consider you having, like, you come from the art and business world. And sometimes there's people that are just in the business world that are trying to connect with the culture. And I think that that's where the future is headed. You know, you mentioned on an interview that you just can't put us all into one bucket. You know, somos diferente, we're unique. And even with that, we have a lot more similarities and differences, you know? And we'll get into that. So for our viewers, can you talk to us a little about your story, where you're from, go through your career and to where it's led you today?
Absolutely. And what I'm excited to share is a different take on the story because when I'm often interviewed, it's about business, technology, stuff like that, startup things, small business things. This is about food. And I don't often get to tell my food story. So I'm going to anchor it in that to make sure it's an emphasis. And that starts with family. So I'm a proud Mexican-American. So I'm a Latina from California. I have a big Mexican family out here. My mom is one of 9 kids and our family gatherings are all about the food, the music and the food. 100%. So I grew up with my abuelita lived with us for some time. She taught me how to cook with her in the kitchen. Some of my earliest memories, I just was making tortillas with maseca for some friends. And they're like, when did you learn how to do this? And I was like, my earliest memories of my abuelita were in the kitchen cooking together and a lot of people. So we just celebrated her 94th birthday in Oxnard, where I'm from, Oxnard, California. It's north of LA. I thought it was just a kickback at my abuelita's house. Turns out it was at my mom's. Full, it's almost a production every time with like the tables, the mesas and the tablecloths. And I'm like, we got caterers. It was my cousin who does catering now. So, you know, in familia always, and was raised in a family that really values education and our passion. So my mom's brothers all play instruments. My tia sings. Now the kids, I got cousins playing the harp and the guitars. And I wasn't the musically talented one. I did grow up playing the piano and learn the congas for a bit too, but my passion's always been food. So since I was little, I was known for making the pastries, the desserts at family gatherings. And in fact, my abuelita asked about 5 times if the cake she had at her birthday this weekend, she's like, ¿Lo hizo Eli? Like she kept asking. And I was like, I'm sorry, abuelita, I didn't make it this time because, you know, that was my thing growing up. And in fact, when I was 12, I was just super obsessed with arts and crafts and loving it. And my mom took me to Michael's and I saw they had cake decorating classes. And so I asked if I could do that. And they said, no, you have to be 18. But since I was little, I always was the one to push a little. I'm definitely my mother's daughter. She's the pusher in the family. I would push and be like, well, can she take it with me? If I need a guardian, can my mom take these cake decorating classes with me? My mom said she would do it if I prepped the cakes and the frostings and everything. And so that was my start. I did all the classes they could offer. And I ended up becoming the cake decorating champion of California at 17. I was like,
serious?
Yeah, like hardcore serious about it.
Legit.
I did competitive cooking. I focused on pastry designs. In fact, in high school, I went to a school, I transferred there because I really wanted to be at the school. My mom was going to teach there. So she became a teacher the year before I got there, but it was a magnet school for the arts / public school. So it's like a school in the hood with normal, a lot of raza, my school is 93% Mexican. So everyone's brown and a focus on music and the culinary department, which no school in my area had ever had. Like that's not a thing. Restaurant style industrial kitchens. And so freshman year I did track because I wanted a letterman's jacket, but once I was done with that, I had to decide if I was going to continue down the sports route. I'm not really an athlete. I did track because it was the one sport they don't make cuts from. So
hey, listen, you're about to patent yogaton, right? Your yoga reggaeton.
Oh, thank you. If there's any kind of athletics I do, it's yogaton. I love me some yoga. I made it up, yoga to reggaeton. It's what I love, but you know, I had to create some form of exercise for myself because I'm not really a gym rat at all. But anyway, a sophomore year, I committed instead of track practice after school, I had culinary practice. We had to do catering. We did our practice for events. We catered to make money to be able to afford our chef's coats, uniforms, hardcore. And so when it was time to go to college, this is kind of like the turning point in my life. I thought I was going to culinary school. I got into the Culinary Institute of America. I had a scholarship. Like I was ready to go. And then Papi said, no, you have to go to regular college. And I was like, Papi, you're killing my dreams. And it was just a moment for me in not realizing the talent and the potential they saw in me. You know, they're like, I had done honors classes and so forth growing up. And I was like, cool. I'll do that. But what I love is cooking, and ended up going to college, finding my way into food in an unusual way when I was at I ended up at Harvard only because my mom made me apply, and I went there not having any context of this world of extreme privilege I've never grown up around. It was just totally different than where I'm from. At my small town, it's about 200 to 300,000 people. So it's a lot of people, but it doesn't feel like, it's not LA. It's not a big city. And I'm a public school kid going into this world that was totally different. And the quick, I was like, long story long, trying to make it faster, is that I ended up interning at Target at their headquarters because I was interested in business. And I figured if I can't go to culinary school, then I want to study something that ultimately they said just get a degree, just get a degree to fall back on is what they wanted for me. But I was like, well, I want to make it relevant to, I guess, business. And there's no business major. So I did sociology of economics. But when I was interviewing with Target, they're like, well, what do you love? I had no strategic answer. I just said, I love food. That was it. And so they put me in the food department, and I got to experience what it's like to be a buyer at a big store like Target. And that summer I ordered every jar of peanut butter that touched every store shelves of all the Targets. I told my mom, tell my Thea to go buy peanut butter at Target. And it was cool to see like the food side of it. Random anecdote, because I know this is the point here, is about stories. I was working with a buyer who did not know how to cook, and I'm in the food division. So she's like, Ghirardelli's sending brownie mix and like sprinkles and all these things. And she had to decide what goes on the shelves. And she's like, I can't even use a microwave. So one of the things I always found interesting is how food, as a passion area of mine, somehow wove its way back into my career in different ways. So I would take all these examples, these like food mixes and things, because the research kitchen was too backed up. So I'd go home, bake everything at night, bring it the next day, and we'd do like focus groups with all my big treats and things. And then we decide what to put on the shelves at Target. So it was pretty cool. But most people, in my interviews end up asking me more about Google. I was there for 10 years. I left this last July.
Which we'll go into that. But I think it's important that we talk about your passion was basically curtailed because of what you thought is not where you ended up. It's where you wanted. Right. Like so let's talk about that, because you're Latina, you went to college, you went to Harvard, you grew up in an upbringing. I am like you, where I wasn't musically talented. My mother sings, which is why she said stick to dancing. And ended up performing with Will Smith and Welcome to Miami. I used to run nightclubs, and it taught me the business part of it. Yes. I auditioned for Food Network Next Champ, network star. I didn't make it, but they kept me on as a consultant. So I got into the business. I got into, basically, I'm an executive at NAREP, where we're the largest business trade association for Latinos on the housing sector. Mm-hmm. So I did see all your interviews on the business side, and it's kind of cool that you're telling the entire story, because I haven't seen this side, the food passionate side, and then sin querer, te metiste en eso. So what made you go from passionate about food to then working at Target to then saying, you know what, because you're fairly young, to now be one of those prominent up in that, C-suite level to talk? What prepared you for that, and how was that experience before we even take on the next step of your career?
For sure. I think one of the biggest influences in my life, definitely my parents for sure, but my parents in two different ways. My mom was always the one who said, you never know unless you try. And she was the one that would push, right? She's like, you have to apply to Harvard, and like, you never know unless you try. And always encouraged me growing up to have these, it's thanks to her. Like, I don't know how she managed a full-time job, driving me to, paint art classes and Michael's cake decorating classes. And so I think she taught me early on that having these passions matters. It's like she made time so that I had time to do these things. So that, I think, is not, I realize it's a blessing that not a lot of kids have. And I want to encourage people to, even if you do it at home, finding ways to pursue your passions. And my dad is an optometrist. They're both first gen. He's first in his family, figured out how to become a doctor, but then figured out, we can talk about it too, how to make tequila. And so my mom was always the one who said, pursue your passion. She's like the dreamer of the two. And my dad was the one who always said, like, have something real to fall back on, all that. But he wanted me to be, go get a degree, go have something very like serious and kind of conventional. But he was the one side hustling forever, because since I was young,
it's in us, right?
Right. Yeah. And in our communities, right. Seeing people who hustle 1 to 3 jobs, selling things from the house. My grandparents, great grandparents had their own side hustles and bodegas in Mexico. So a lot of that influence, I think, was just already in me, because it was normal to me. And it was,
my mother was an insurance executive, but she had her catering business. My father used to have his 8 to 5, and then he has construction business on the side. So it's already amongst us to have additional streams of income, And so it was natural for you. So then you go to school, you do Target, obviously being the head of multicultural for Google and working at that. Because I remember back then, parallel, I'm telling you, we did a site visit to Facebook and how they were launching out the business page kind of domains for small businesses, and I'm sure you were behind that. That's a big responsibility. What did you learn? Because even that was a stepping stone to where you're headed now.
Absolutely. I mean, when I got to Google, this was 10 years ago now, actually, as an intern, even in 2009, I realized that the business they were running, meaning, small business advertisers, large scale advertisers, we weren't at the table, not just internally and as talent, because diversity in tech is sort of a trendy topic in the last 5 years or so. I knew there was no one, I did not expect anyone that was going to look like me at the table internally.
Yeah.
But the advertisers, for example, small business advertisers, weren't diverse at all. And I thought, is there something that we don't know? Is there a criteria that they met in some way? And it was like, no, it's not that they're trying to exclude us. They're just marketing to everyone, but they're not speaking to us. And so from the jump, I saw, okay, there's an opportunity here for me to help connect the dots, because as a small business owner with my family, we have an organic tequila company. And I had to tell my dad, hey, let's get a website. Let's do these different things online, knowing people in our community are also in the same boat of like the hustle, the construction companies and the restaurants. It was before social media really took off.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it was like this evolution of, we've all been hustling, but how is that hustle evolving as technology is a factor? And so I was able to create these pilot projects that showed people what could happen, right? I was like, to me, it's always about access. How do we give diverse communities like ours, especially with the hustle that we have? I think if we already have the hustle, imagine what's possible with tech as a tool in our hands to amplify our messages.
When you create systems and profitability, because while we start businesses much faster than the general population, we seem to be micro in revenue. And so that's probably for another interview. So
we'll go on that.
You made an impact. I just want to show you this is not a regular show where you're like, okay, we're just talking about
no, I like the back and forth. This is good.
Yeah, well, that's like the Latino today, right?
Yeah.
Tenemos la cultura, tenemos negocio, we're hustlers, and we love fashion, and we love music. It's like you can't pigeonhole us. You can't say your last name is Murillo, my name's Armando. We're gonna prefer Taco Bell and give me a campaign to eat healthy. That shit is so offensive. But
right.
So then let's talk about the Tequila company, because your father was educated optometrist, and now you're saying with your mother and father doing this tequila company, you're implementing what you have seen, what you've kind of put out for Latinos. Has it been fun working alongside with your parents? And tell us what the funnest part is.
The funnest part lately now is seeing my dad grow with me, because he saw me grow up my whole life, right? Like he saw the whole process. But now one of the connections, like I started the multicultural marketing team at Google, founded that after doing a number of things. So I'm like, my career is advancing while having the side hustle, and really doing tequila with my family was that strategic advantage at Google, where I realized, oh, I have real small business experience. They're trying to market to small business owners. I am that person. My dad's that person. So I could really have lived experience that was relevant. So I helped with Google, but then on the tequila side, I was helping my family learn with me. It's like, hey, I'm learning about analytics. I'm learning about digital advertising. Let's weave that in over here too. So they really went hand in hand, and I was able to cross-pollinate. So now the fun part is seeing my dad be open-minded now that I almost had to prove myself to my dad. Like, I mean, we designed the bottles together and the logos my whole life. But now from an operational marketing strategic level, and especially in a pandemic where we had to do things a little differently. So all of a sudden my skill set, I know I was valued, and they always included my sister and me since the beginning, but I'm now, the fun part for me now is seeing my dad say yes more. And
well, not only that, but I think embracing the technology and systems you're teaching them.
Right.
Because if, my mother's still hustling, retired, I couldn't tell her about the things you just talked about, because she's still old school, right? So I think that's pretty cool. And I think that is awesome. So why tequila? Did your dad have a passion? Did he grow up from a part of Mexico where tequila is very common? Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so you can only produce tequila in 3 zones of Mexico, almost like 3 states, more or less. And so Jalisco is one of them. That's where my dad's side's from. But he was born in a tiny, tiny little pueblito where agave had never been grown before. So that was different. My dad took a science kit down to the ranch, tested the soil, realized it's really close to what is conventionally known as like basically what elements have to be in the soil to make it to allow you to cultivate agave. And they used to say no va dar. Like the soil is brown. It's normally kind of a brick red. It doesn't look like agave growing soil, but he figured out how to do it. And it was, he was researching tomatoes, alpacas. It could have been anything. Landed on agave though, because it's a crop. Agave doesn't need a lot of irrigation. It's in a pretty dry area. And so we thought, we're here, right? We're in the US. What's something that could grow without needing us to be constantly there maintaining? We have an amazing foreman who actually was born on the rancho, who's been essentially part of the family since the start. So he was able to manage things on the ground, and my dad did it all organically from the start. We made that commitment early on. And so knowing that tequila also is a product that's very unique to Mexico, it's almost like good quality tequila in my mind is like the champagne to France, right? You can only
Yeah,
make
100%.
in France.
So
And
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. Do you sip your tequila or do you shoot it?
oh no, we don't disrespect tequila, we sip it.
There you go. It's for our viewers. That's why it's good to ask, right?
Do you know
How,
why people think, maybe not a lot of people know why people think about shooting, why that's seen as okay, and lemon, I mean the limes and the salt?
tell me why. Tell us why.
Poor quality tequila brands years ago wanted the consumer to mask the burn and the flavor that's just kind of awful. And it's like some people have terrible memories of bad experiences with tequila. Well, of course, if you're practically drinking gasoline, it's gonna burn. So the salt and the lime helps it go down smoother, and then they chill it. And at the end of the day, people are gonna drink it however they want. But we want to make sure we're helping. My personal mission is to reintroduce people to tequila, help them understand this is a product that is part of our heritage. It's cultural, it's beautiful, and you don't need to take shots in order to enjoy it. And once you know the work, the craftsmanship that goes into it, you don't want to rush it. You want to savor it, especially if it's been aged. So we have up to 14 years aged.
Yeah.
To shoot that back after all the work we put into it. No.
You gave the best analogy. Tequila to what the country is like what champagne is to France.
Yeah.
I think that's the best analogy. Yeah, from now on, I'm just gonna look down at my friends who shoot up the shots and say, "You guys are fucking ghetto."
Just pray for them. They know not what they do, but we need to educate them.
No, I like that. Well, this is what the show's about. So that so I wish you the best of luck because you're obviously in a very competitive market, and you're also. I vote for the underdog, because obviously you guys have your careers, but this is your passions, your legacy. So that's dope. What do you think is the biggest setback challenge that you're overcoming as your business, your tequila company, so that our viewers can relate to that same challenge that they have to take it up to the next level?
Well, I mean, I think when you're starting any company, understanding the landscape and who the big players are, you figure, okay, how do you compete? Well, we know we have a good product. If someone tastes it, we know they love it. So that's, to us, it's almost like, don't believe me, just watch. Don't believe me, just sip. Like if you sip it, one of the five, we tend to have people like at least one of them, if not all of them. So that we're confident in. But the challenge though, is that the tequila industry is run by marketing dollars, big budgets. So to the point of the underdog, it's like, we're a family owned, we're one of the few Mexican owned and operated small business tequila companies, small batch. It's not tiny. One of our big rounds when we imported was about 200,000 bottles. So it's not a tiny production, but we don't have the budgets that these massive companies have because we're running this ourselves. And what's interesting is when you go to bars and restaurants, when you see the big branding and like the bartenders are wearing shirts with a certain brand, it's because the brands are paying for that. So of course you're going to see that and think, oh, let me try that. That must be good. You're not getting marketed the one that's the best quality, the one that you're going to enjoy the most. No, you're exposed, you're marketed whatever is being paid to be marketed.
Does social media help you with that maybe? Because now social media is a whole different, now we're attracted to the people versus the company.
Absolutely.
So has that been an advantage that you guys are kind of, maximizing on?
Yeah, I think it's important because for one, it kind of humanizes the brand. People know it's by us. If you just see a row of bottles on the shelf, you don't know the stories behind each one. So I think social media to me is, in an ideal world, is a platform for amplification of stories, like telling people the real authentic stories. And for us, the social impact. A lot of people don't know, or I mean, it's very rare to find a socially conscious tequila company. So we really prioritize that. We're supporting organizations, efforts around education, supporting farm workers, Black Lives Matter, creating jobs in Mexico, keeping families united. And also we bought a bus to be able to take girls from our little town into the neighboring bigger city. It's still relatively small, but we're seeing generational change, seeing girls go to school, become teachers, coming back, teaching the local community. We paid to have a basketball court created for the guys. They're working in the fields, not having to leave unsafely sometimes to the US for work to find, to make money to help support their families. They can stay now and, let's make sure they're having a good quality of life. So that impact matters a lot to us.
100%. You went to school, you went the business world. Now you're an entrepreneur. You've always been parallel with that. Even on this interview, you're speaking very confidently. For our viewers out there who have their own businesses, they're either caterers, winemakers, comedians, profiles, because I highlight anyone that has a success story, how do you prepare to be such a good, eloquent speaker? Because that's important when building a brand.
Mm. I think you just really got to believe in the stories you're telling and believe that there's value, that someone's going to take something from it. Because for me, I had to realize early on, if I don't tell people what I'm doing, people won't know what's possible. And our culture is one about like, be humilde, don't flaunt, don't be arrogant. And I'm not a fan of people being arrogant, but when I realized that if I don't tell these stories, people aren't going to know what's possible. I'm a brown girl from Oxnard, California. I told my mom, I'm not going to apply to Harvard because people like us don't go to schools like that. And I was wrong. I went and did it. And if I keep that to myself and don't talk about it, someone else out there, some other little brown girl is not going to know she can. Someone else is going to think, oh, I can have a side hustle. Well, I want to make sure people know they can. So for me personally, it's like I had to find that motivation to make sure I'm not doing people a disservice by not sharing these stories. But when you're asking about like, all right, how do you prepare to tell good stories, and especially professionally? Like I always tell people, the data gets the meeting, get your data down right, but the stories approach the heart or the purse strings. So I always try to pair both together. Like you got to have your numbers right, but you got to nail the story.
That is probably one of the best answers, and that I didn't expect, is just to believe in yourself and believe in the data, because that is true. When you're telling your story, people know if you're inauthentic, if you're fake. Yeah. People know why you're doing it. They don't like commercials. And you know what? I asked you personally because I saw an interview where you were with Raúl de la Vega and Sal Trujillo. You know, and those are, ellos son gigante. And just so you know, I'm one of the investors in Latitude. So I, you know, I'm on there with Saul and Gary Acosta. So to have you be so far younger than those and to be con esos monstruos and just deliver something definitive the way you did was pretty cool. And I like to think, you know, I've interviewed Henry Cisneros and, you know, other senators and stuff, and even like people like us. So I think I'm pretty good, but I've always wanted to ask you on how do you prepare? Because that's a different platform, because you're speaking into a TV. Usually I speak into audiences, and you do too, but when you're speaking to the TV, you don't feel that emotion. So you know, social media, right? So it helps tell your story.
Absolutely.
Let me ask you this. Where do you want to be in 2 years? What does Eliana, con the professional world, the agency, the tequila company, the profile that you are, because social media now gives us another parallel platform to have a voice, to have the stories so people feel it's possible. I think there's a need for new faces que se parecen como nosotros to lead the future of Latinos. Nothing against the old timers now, but it's necesario, right? So
they're looking at us like it's about time. Están cansados. They're like, hello, who's ready to go, right? So I'll give you the quick story to paint the picture. A few years ago, I had an offsite with my team. We did a yoga meditation session. And so the instructor said, envision yourself in 10 years. What do you see? You're looking at yourself in 10 years. And I saw myself standing in front, like right in front of me. I saw, and I've never shared this publicly, I saw myself standing there looking not too different. I'm like, all right, we got good genes in the family. I'm going to look 16 for the rest of my life. But I was standing there looking more or less pretty similar, but I was wearing a really badass fitted suit, carrying an art kit. And I felt it. I was like, I can do both. I can do business and I can be an artist. So what does that mean for me? And actually I painted that, and I had this like really bright golden aura around me. So I have a painting of myself on this path with trees, and I'm like out in nature, which to me felt like I'm in community. I'm building community and creating in community. So one example, I'm trying to make sure I make more art. These are some of my paintings behind me.
Those are your paintings?
Yeah, this is my first self-portrait.
That's pretty cool, man. I thought they were just beautiful paintings.
No, we gotta. So I'm wearing I always try to plug the people I love. My tío is an artist in Mexico who paints and then turns it into prints and scarves and other things. So I made these in Mexico with him. I mean, I painted them in a studio and I brought them back here.
Well, this is one from my line, Achieving Dopeness. That's what you
and I love that. I'm gonna need to order one of those.
No, I'll send it to you. It's one of my passion projects. So I like that. I didn't know. Wow. Okay. So 2 years out, you're saying you can be in a power business suit and have the art and culture.
Yeah. And to me, what that means is like right now I'm at the beginning of, I'm developing my venture studio. So both I consult and coach startups and making some investments here and there while, you know, I'm trying to be mindful of how to invest financial, social, and human capital into amazing leaders and visionaries. I really believe in that. While incubating my own, so I'm developing some apps early stage. A big part of me deciding to leave Google was realizing I'm a huge advocate for giving access to our communities for the products that work, right? We need to make sure people know about them, know about Google Maps and Instagram and so forth. But I'm like, there's so many tools that our community needs and diverse communities at large that haven't been built yet. So working on that, I'll share more updates.
You had to do that because we don't have a Latino Jay-Z, a Latino Diddy.
Right.
We don't have a Latino Gary V, right? And like, again, going back, no disrespect, lo que están ahorita, we need folks like you to step out. We need folks like myself to say, hey, like you met me through Comidazo, which is a platform that aligns perfectly with what you're talking about. Because I'm going to be more about the business, but I want to support the culture. And now you can do both.
Right.
You know, so we needed you to do that, and the community, basically, not me, but the community needs you to do that.
Yeah.
Because now you're not just at a big firm general, now you're specializing in tools that are needed and essential, because no one else is doing it. Everyone's investing in medical, not as much as what you're doing now, and that's awesome that we got to connect on this. So that's your 2-year thing. That's pretty deep. So you're very ambitious.
I want to keep being creative. I think of myself as an entrepreneur, designer, community builder. I started Latinas Who Brunch. Through that, we make sure when we're in person, our events are always at Latino, Latina founded restaurants. If we're going to spend money, want to bring it back to the community. I do artwork and also helping. I mean, I'm helping. I'm just here to help, but I'm sort of a
Are you based in the Bay, or are you still in LA?
No, I'm in LA. Yeah. So I have an office, Santa Monica, and live in South Central.
I'm launching out a food concept in LA. I'd love to do a pop-up with your art for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
And of course, I do a lot here in the Bay Area, so there's some synergy. I'm in LA probably once a month now with what I'm starting. Anyways. So
we'll be hanging out. Everyone listening, watching is gonna have crazy FOMO, but we'll take some selfies and let people feel like they're there with us.
Exactly. My next question, let's have a little bit of fun, okay?
Okay.
What are your pet peeves in the industry that you're in?
Fixed mindsets. I prefer growth mindsets. When people just can't. One thing is people who aren't open to learning and reframing and imagining something different and learning from someone. When I feel that block, I'm like, this isn't going to go anywhere, because how are we going to learn from each other if our ears and eyes aren't open? You know, people that are that rigid in how they do things. But also I have to be patient, because this is the norm, but people who don't let themselves envision from a place of yes and. So I love brainstorming with people and like, let's think bigger, and like, it's kind of like improv, right? Where it's like, you have an idea, I'm like, you just said pop up with art and food. I'm like, oh, well, let's do a tequila tasting, like, let's go back and forth and like, let's build. When I share, because a lot of what I'm doing is ideating and brainstorming and then developing strategies either for my companies or the startups I'm working with, I want that flow, that energy. When people immediately respond with why something won't work, mátame. Like, that is the end of me. Like, oh my God, like we're smart enough to figure that out, but let me get there. Let's get there together.
And even if it doesn't work, what's the solution? Especially when you're in a brainstorming element. Yeah, that's one of the things I go off of. You can have challenges that you're gonna pick at it, but what's the solution? If not, just chill. Yeah. What is your pet peeve in society, en la sociedad?
People lacking empathy. I think it is so hard to see people judge one another, hurt one another, cannot put themselves, not only empathy is like dream, right? Not even sympathizing, because it is so quick for people to judge or to cut things off or to blame. And it's like, can you even imagine putting yourself in someone else's shoes? Or just know everyone's going through some shit. Don't judge each other so hard. And so I think that lack of empathy, it's making humanity fall apart, right? It's like, let's make people human again. Because anyway, I think some of the problems we have in society, the big challenges are just people, there's not enough heart, you know, like corazón.
Yeah, if there's one thing called to action, I agree with you, it's empathy. It's forgetting your political views. It's about humanity first. No es que soy un ángel, but come on, what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. And that's the tough part, because, you know, you want to have your differences in things, but it's really tough to function with somebody, whether it be at work or your superior or a partner or a significant other, when that's a very big component they don't tell you in 6th grade when you're listening to your first Bobby Brown song and like getting your crushed on, is like, it's gonna matter your political views, your societal views. You know what I mean? Es una cosa más difícil that I find hard, either from longtime friends or just close associates, is like, where's your lack of empathy?
Right. Like, I mean, people can have political views all day, but political views aside, if you don't understand that children in cages is wrong, what's going on here? Like, they're humans. Like, let's have some empathy for those experiences. So that's an extreme example. I mean, at this point, it's long overdue conversation, but I think that people so often are quick to get mad at each other. It's very reactive. And so part of that, I think, having empathy for others, but the other pet peeve I have is people don't do the work to understand themselves. What are their triggers? Name the triggers. So then you're not just triggering at people.
They rather tweet, right? And Jose Andres said it to us the other day. He says it's really hard to listen to each other when we're busy yelling at each other.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I shouldn't even say Jose Andres. I should have just said it was my quote. Just kidding. All right.
Pet peeve when people don't give credit when credit is due. I'm kidding.
No, I got to. Like I always end like I have like I'm a Latino organization, but every time we do a goodbye, I always say, listen, like the favorite movie I watched during COVID was Harriet Tubman, you know. And so I'm always saying we out, right? Because that was her. That was dope.
Yeah.
El mundo se está acabando. The last meal on earth, what would it be?
My go-to. I grew up because my mom had morning sickness with my sister like crazy. So all the time, like multiple times a week, we went to this Japanese restaurant. Teppan shrimp with the fried rice and vegetable sauteed and green tea tempura ice cream. I have a specific meal. I like to ask people if it's like your birthday meal, what would you ask for? When I used to ask people the last meal and they're like, that's morbid. I'm like, no, like you want this to count. Like that is my go-to. But I'm going to say that, but because it's a comidazo Latino food, my abuelita's fideo.
Yeah.
Un chile con carne and some hammy tortillas. Oh my God. Like,
no,
so either home cooked food or some ethnic. I love traveling. I love fusion food. So I'd go hand in hand.
No, that sounds delicious. And again, going back to not all Latinos have the same behavior. You know, you just mentioned Japanese food. Of course, it's going to bring you home to your mother's cooking, your grandma's cooking, but that's good for our viewers in corporate America to see, because somos hispano, we vote, we are entrepreneurial, and we're like not just always in one path. So I love asking these questions. 100%. Yeah. 3 people that are alive. You're cooking, I'm cooking for them. Who would be at your table? 3 people that are alive.
I'm just gonna go with who comes to mind right now.
Of course.
Celia Cruz.
Why?
Azúcar, like everything about her rhythm, her confidence as an amazing, I mean, trailblazing woman, Latina, Afro-Latina, like, oh my God. And if I'm going to put sazon in the food, I want sazon around me. And that's the flavor I want at the table.
Boom.
So when I was thinking, I'm going to think out loud and then I'll nail the 3 because I'm a verbal processor. I thought of the Obamas, but I'm like, can they have one chair? Like, can they share it? Because I'd love both of them there. And ¿quién más? I want to have, again, I'm like, I'm a Latina. I'm going to bring more people than you invited because I got primos and other people to invite. So I'm going to get me 3 seats. I have 27 cousins. So I thought of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta together because I could have said Cesar, but I'm like, no disrespect to Dolores. She's a national treasure, living legend. And they did it hand in hand. So Celia Cruz deserves her throne by herself, the Obamas, and the leaders of the farm worker movement.
I'm glad that you said Dolores because she gets... you know, again, no disrespect to anybody, she doesn't get enough credit for her role in that. So I'm big on that.
Shows up. I don't know how she is at more social events, even online, than I am. I am so impressed by her. She's incredible.
No, she's an amazing person. And then, of course, the Obamas is just class, hope. You know, the guy's still shooting threes, like, you know, he's in the gym. And Celia, you said it right. So I have, I'll share with you my personal page later, but I do have my personal achieving dopeness kind of inspiration shirt. It's got Anthony Bourdain, got Bruce Lee. Yeah,
so many overlaps. I love Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah, Bruce Lee, because of course, you know, soy chino nicaragüense. Jay-Z, because of business.
Dope.
Hector Lavoe, because I'm a salsero.
Okay.
Michael Jordan, the GOAT in basketball. And the last one is Celia Cruz. And that is because of how she left her country. She fought the country of communism, similar to when we left Nicaragua. She was never able to go back. And then she had a happy marriage until the end. And it's just class. And one day there's going to be a great documentary or movie on her because she's up there to me with like Sonia Sotomayor. We have to talk about these legends, living legends or lo de pasado, you know? Yes. So that's why I asked you why. That was pretty dope.
Well, real quick to add, because you said a couple people who are on my other list. I have like a roster of role models is what I call it. People that I'm not trying to be them, but there's things about them that I like to embody or I aim to. So Oprah, for just telling stories, the weight that her voice carries is really powerful to me. And people love her like as a voice, right? Martha Stewart for the cooking and the crafting and all that stuff. And she's cool with Snoop Dogg. So that says a lot. I'm just kidding. And then Anthony Bourdain for the travel and cooking. I have years of footage. I've taken cooking classes all over the world. I love it. It's a passion of mine. And so I have travel videos that I haven't edited. So this is one of my on my to-do list.
Ooh.
I think he's a dope, and his advocacy for Latino workers in the kitchens, I think is really powerful. Richard Branson, because he does so many things and makes me feel sort of normal, because people around me are always like, do one thing. And I'm like, no puedo, that's boring. I will die inside. And he's a very big advocate for socially responsible business. So I think that's cool. And then Celia and Frida Kahlo.
You know, I'm laughing. One, because you said I'm Latina, so there's no way I'm going to invite just three. Two, it sounded like a Grammys award speech when you're like, I got to thank everybody. Hold on a second.
Thank you. Everybody, hold up. Give me extra time. Cut the ads. I can bring it.
No, I think it's great. I think if you abstract all the gems you've given us and you don't look at you or myself, the audience and the corporate executives wouldn't know that they're talking to two Latinos.
Mhm.
Y es lo que me gusta.
Yeah.
That people understand who we are, and that's why I'm glad to have you on the show, and so thank you, and I look forward to buying some bottles and getting some of the wine stuff that I'm doing in LA, and connect after this and stay in contact, because it is dope to have your story out there. I don't know how you got so far without the radar, because usually I'm in the radar for Latino leaders.
Same. I'm like, you're doing all these things. You mentioned so many things, and I'm like, our worlds were meant to connect. And you know what? I think this is better than being in the lobby at some conference that you and I sponsored or whatever. Like, the real conversations are where real connections happen.
Yeah. Do you, in closing, do you remember January 6th, what happened at the Capitol?
I do.
So I'm actually interviewing Congressman Gallego next week. I'll send you an invite. It's an invite-only link. Me and my colleague are interviewing him on how it was feeling inside, being a hero that happens to be Latino.
Wow.
So one time, sometimes I'm interviewing congressmen at the Capitol break-in, and then sometimes I'm rocking with recipes and stuff like that.
I love it.
So we're going to definitely have to connect and stay in contact. But thank you for being on the show. Keep on kicking ass, because the best thing that people can do for our community is to be successful, because when we see it, we know that it can happen. Any closing remarks? Because this is like your speech where like the music of the Grammys is on, because you went over, but it's so cool. Anything in closing for our viewers?
All right. Open the door, keep it open, stay hungry, make sure our people are fed. There you go. Eliana Murillo, muchas gracias, and we out. If I die now, my love is so much. Thank you. Thank you.